Okay, the last thing we're learning is about Davar Chorif. Okay, the bottom line, what we finished off yesterday was that if somebody, let's say, cut an onion with a meat knife, so the onion is meat. Oh, well, yeah, one thing that needs to be not corrected, but to clarified. We learned yesterday a din. Yeah, what happens if somebody cut an onion with a dairy knife, and then by mistake they put it into the chicken soup? Okay, now we said the onion is meat, but when you have, so now the onion is dairy, okay, because you cut it with a dairy knife, but now you put it into soup. So we said if the soup is 60 times, it's kosher. But now 60 times what? So the halacha is you don't need 60 times the whole onion. The onion is treif because of the blade that went into it. So the dairy that's in the onion, spread out throughout the onion, is really only the dairy that was in the blade. So now if you have in the chicken soup 60 times the amount of the blade, then the food would be kosher. You don't need 60 times the onion. You need 60 times the blade, because the taste of the onion, that's dairy, the whole onion is a dairy based on the slicing of the onion, of the dairy knife. So you need 60 times the dairy knife. Okay. Therefore, we learned, bottom line is, you should have parva knives to cut the onions and all the sharp stuff. Okay, next is like this. Moving on. Now, this dinim is called like the customs of meat and milk. Now, the general rules. Now, we have to be more careful with meat and milk than we are with kosher and non-kosher. Because kosher and non-kosher, one's treif and one's not. One's kosher, one's not. But the problem with meat and milk, and that's why it's called a halachic, it's completely illogical, because meat is kosher, milk is kosher, yet you put two koshers together, it becomes treif. Similar to shatnez, wool is allowed, linen is allowed. You put wool and linen together, two positives don't make a negative. But in these dinim, they do. So you have to be more careful, because, in the house you have meat and you have milk. Treif you don't keep in the house, generally speaking. So because of that, Chachamim were stricter about certain dinim with meat and milk than they would be with treif and kosher. So for instance, two people that know each other are not allowed to sit at the same table next to each other, one eating a salami sandwich and one eating a cheese sandwich. Why? Because we're afraid, if the table is very big, that even if you stick out your hand, you're not going to reach the other guy, it doesn't matter. But what are we afraid of? You know each other, you share lunches, you're going to share some cheese and he's going to share some salami. So if one's eating kosher, one milk and one's meat, you're not allowed to sit at the same table. Now, if you make a recognition between them, like one eats on a mat and one doesn't eat on a mat, so then it's a reminder that one's milk and one's meat, so you won't come. So there's this very big problem, by the way, in schools, especially even the frum schools, that kids bring their own lunches. Okay? So sometimes I'm in the same class. You can have a kid bringing, very practical, a cheese sandwich, and you can have a kid in the same class sitting next to him with a meat sandwich. So you have to be really very careful, because, kids share, and they're going to do this and that, and they're going to end up eating chas v'sholom treif. Even their little kids, you have to be very careful. But if they're eating on two separate cloths or something, they put something in between them, like a mechitza, between the two of them, then it's not a problem. Now, what happens if you're not eating right now on the table? You're not eating now on the table. You're allowed to put meat and milk on the same table. Let's say you have a container of milk, a container of meat, whatever, because you're not eating, so we're not afraid you're going to share it with each other. What, you wanted to ask something?
If the two people are having a meal together, would a salt shaker suffice as a pizza?
A salt shaker, yeah, if it's there as a sign that they should know we're separated.
But if they're using it, it doesn't help.
No, if they're going to use it, it won't help, because then it's not a sign, they're just using it. We'll learn soon about salt shakers and pepper shakers and mustards and ketchup containers. Okay, you know what, let's talk about it now already. Halachically, you really need to have separate salt shakers for meat and milk. Why? Because let's say, for argument's sake, a salt shaker has holes in it. So let's say you have a hot chicken soup. Okay, that's steaming. Or a pot of soup that's steaming, yeah? And you want to put salt in there. So what do? You take your salt shaker and you go like this and you pour it onto the chicken soup. Now, the chicken soup is steaming. The steam is meat, it's halachic. So now it's going to go into the holes. So it's going to make your salt shaker meat. It's going to make it halachic. Then one day you're going to use it for hot milk soup or whatever. And then again, you'll have, so the salt shaker will become treif. So therefore, old Jewish minhag, old Jewish custom for the last probably 10,000 years, before the world was created, is you have separate salt shakers for meat and milk. Some people have 3, one for meat, one for milk, one for parted. But that you really don't need. The same thing, what?
Now, accept it, but wouldn't there be batal b'shishim, or because the salt affects the flavor?
It's not going to be batal b'shishim, and the salt affects the flavor, yes. So it gives taste. So you have the same thing. You have, let's say, ketchup and mustard. Okay, so let's say you're making a halachic soup, and it's steaming, and you're going to put ketchup in, whatever, spaghetti and meat, so I mean, whatever you're doing, you're going to be pouring ketchup in. Now you're going to go like this, the ketchup container over the meat, and the steam is coming up, so now it's going into the ketchup container, so it's going to become halachic. Then one day you're going to use it for hot pizza, you're going to, and not only that, especially most people are not careful. You know, when you pour, you ever see kids pour, the ketchup touches the meat, and the ketchup touches the pizza, and the ketchup touches everything. It's not that you're pouring on top. Even pouring on top is an issue, because the steam goes up, and it's going to go into milk and halachic. What?
If you season it before you warm up the
So again, technically, if you season it before you warm it up, it's not going to be a problem. But the problem is people use salt shakers for hot, and they don't think, those...
temperature, it may start taking on.
Yeah, but once 110 degrees, it's hot enough halachically to make an issue with it. So generally speaking, in religious homes, they have separate salt shakers. And again, it could be, it depends what type of house you have, so to speak. You know, you can have a house where the kids pour the ketchup directly on top of the hot dog, and the hot dog could be hot, and they're touching the hot dog with the bottle with the hot dog and the hot pizza, and you can have a problem. All these things. So people, especially in those cases, should have a separate ketchup for meat and milk. Again, it's not halacha, but this is practical, because you could end up with, and it's sharp, so it's even worse. So it could make bigger problems with meat and milk. Generally speaking, there's an old rabbinic saying, not from the Chacham, from rabbis, that a house that's not clean, I'm talking about the kitchen, a house that's not clean is questionably kosher. Because it's impossible that things don't get mixed up. All the rabbis will tell you, a house that's not clean is questionable if it's kosher. Because there's dirty meat and dirty chicken, dirty cheese, and it's a house which is organized and clean. You have much less questions of meat and milk together, or b'chal kashrus together. So that's that story. Somebody was asking.
Yeah, the old-fashioned salt that you pour from your finger in.
So the old-fashioned, by the way, it's new-fashioned also. It's not only old-fashioned. They're not the salt shaker. But the salt shaker that you have a little dish, again, you take with your hands. Now, what happens if your hands got dirty from meat and you stick your hands into the salt shaker, into the salt plate, which people do, If you're putting your fingers into you trust me, you don't wash your hands every time you stick your hands into the salt shaker or the salt dish, whatever you call it. Or it could be dirty hands, and you have dirty hands with meat on it, so then you're putting your hands into the salt and making it meat or dairy. Is it just things that people should be aware of, that you need to be careful that, not only that, we learned the din the other day, if cold meat and cold milk touch each other, you just have to wash it off well. That's after the fact. But l'chatchila, Chachamim said, you shouldn't put meat and milk, even if it's cold, next to each other. Now, obviously, if they're in bags, it doesn't matter. But let's say you have a refrigerator, and you have cheese and you have meat, and they're not in a bag, so you shouldn't be putting meat and milk next to each other in the refrigerator, even though it's cold and whatever. Why? Because you just don't do it, because you want to be careful not to have meat and milk touching, because halachically you have to wash it. What happens if you forget to wash it? So then you have an issue. So all these things the Chum said you have to be careful with. Another thing the Chum, what?
Those table salt, the round one with the metal opening, does that have to be separate from the meat?
Again, if it open, like the Morton container, the Morton salt container. Okay, but when you open that up and you pour it over a hot bowl, a hot pot of halachic soup, the steam is still going to go up into the salt. Right? I mean, it's not Kabbalah. This is very practical, simple, logical observance of Yiddishkeit, of kashrus. You have to be careful in the kashrus. Not only that, Chum say you're not allowed to bake milchik bread or fleishik bread. Let's say instead of flour and water, you use flour and chicken schmaltz, or you use gravy from the meat in order to bake a challah. Or somebody, instead of water, or just adds milk into the challah or the bread. So halachically, you're not allowed to do that. And if you do that, you're not allowed to eat it. Why? Because bread is something which is eaten, meat and parv, and bread is something that you eat with everything else. You're going to bake a milchik bread, let's say. People they'll see a loaf of bread. They don't know that people assume bread is parv. So they're going to eat it with a fleishik meal, because, you eat it with a fleishik, with bread, you eat with a meat meal. But they don't know that the bread has milk in it. So you have to be careful. Now, if you make it a different shape, before you bake it, because let's say it says in halacha, what happens if you baked it? And then you change the shape, it's too late. Because once you baked it, it became treif. So you can't change it afterwards, but if you change it before, you make a different shape that it's noticeable. For instance, you make pizza, right? Pizza is bread, basically, with cheese on it. So it's a shape that everybody knows is pizza. It's not pepperoni pizza. What?
So on a let's say a challah, if you're making a dairy challah, you want to make it with a noticeable shape on the top of the challah, something that is very...
As long as people will see clearly that it's different. Okay, then the Chacham never agreed, because people will see that that's different. So they'll ask, what?
When you're cooking something in a pot and it's hot, for example, fish or the dairy, and you move the top of the pot, and there is some hot steam from it, and it drips around on the stove or on the countertop. Then you use another utensil. What happens in this situation?
So you have to be careful. If, let's say, you open a pot, let's think, why do you have to go there? You're cooking a meat soup, chicken soup or whatever, and it boils over. And now it goes onto the stovetop. And when it squirts, it squirts. So it's not necessarily exactly where the pot is. It could be, so you have an issue. That the hot soup is fleishik, and if it's going to touch part of the burner, that's why you're not supposed to have meat and milk burners. People should have separate burners. Not everybody is machmir in this, but they should be, it says in halacha, and they should have a separate burner for meat and milk. Also, they shouldn't be cooking meat and milk at the same time. I can't tell you how many people call with questions. I wasn't thinking, that's the style, I wasn't thinking, and they're cooking a meat soup, a meat pot, and then they're cooking something dairy, and you don't think. So you take the ladle, the spoon to stir it, and then you go into the next one. You don't think. You're not thinking always. Most people don't think usually. So then your problem is what you just made. You took a halachic ladle, which was in a hot pot of soup, and now you're putting it into your milchik dish. So you have to be careful. They shouldn't be cooking at the same time.
Okay, so in that situation, the stove becomes...
You might have to kasher this.
How do you...
You might be able to kasher just by turning it on very hot. There is a machlekes, I'll just say this, it's not in these dinim, it's in Hilchos Pesach. You know, a gas grate. Yeah, the fire burns, right? Now what happens when you kasher that for Pesach? So you want to kasher the gas grate for Pesach. How hot does it have to be? Is libun kal enough? That means it's getting very hot that if you touch it, you're going to burn? Or does it have to be boiling red hot? In halacha it's called a chatzuva. In Yiddish it's called a dreifus, because it has dreifus means 3 legs. Those grates, generally speaking, usually used to have 3 legs, right, on the stove. So now that this, let's say, chametzik thing is spilled over onto the grate. Okay, so do you need libun gamur, which means red hot, or is it enough just to do libun kal, meaning just turn on the fires and get it very hot? So there are opinions, like Mr. Bruder says, for Pesach you can just make it libun kal, just get it very hot. The Alter Rebbe holds you have to make it mamish red hot. So Mr. Bruder holds, what's the reason for that? Because he says even if things spill, you can assume the fire right away burnt it up. So the fire right away kashered it, so to speak. But it's not always the situation. Okay.